And look, we're surrounded by this. Oh, look, the logo on the front of my car is an occult symbol. You're using an Apple product. The apple represents the apple from Eden. It's like the Bible doesn't say it was an apple. Just saying.
Thank
But
you.
anyway, yeah. Anyway, the bottom, and hey, so that means we're just using the enemy's devices against him. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that clever?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Just remember Psalm 2. The nations rage and imagine a vain thing. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision.
It's amazing. So, Enfoque, bienvenidos a Enfoque con Marcia Castillo. Hoy tenemos un excelente episodio para ustedes y sé que será revelador y muy interesante todo lo que vamos a compartir, porque está con nosotros Derek Gilbert y él ha escrito muchos libros. Él es presentador de 5 en 10, tiene un análisis diario de las noticias con el ministerio de Skywatch TV y es coanfitrión de programas semanales, Los grandes misterios de la Biblia y la revelación desentrañada con su esposa, la autora y analista Sharon Gilbert. Así es que sin más, le vamos a dar la bienvenida a Derek y vamos a comenzar a hablar de este libro tan excelente que él ha escrito. Derek, I want to welcome you to Enfoque, Focus with Marcia Castillo.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here, Marcia. Thank you.
You have written many books, just to name a few. The Gates of Hell, oh my goodness. The Second Coming of Saturn, Giants, Gods, and Dragons, The Great Inception, and one of my favorites, The Last Clash of the Titans, The Second Coming of Hercules. And maybe when we hear this, we're like, what? Hercules? Needless to say, I have most of your books, and I think it's fair to say that you are an excellent writer.
Oh, you're very, the funny thing is when Sharon and I got married 27 years ago, I could think never 27. It was
You get that right.
yeah. I actually remember the date on the calendar, which is a good thing.
Okay.
She has always been a writer, and I was convinced that I couldn't write, and she encouraged me and said, "Yes, you can." And so I'm looking up at the wall here, and I've got book covers, missing a couple actually, but yeah, since 2017, we've now got 3, 8, 9, 10, I think 12 books that we've authored or co-authored. 3 of them with Sharon, Giants, Gods, and Dragons, Veneration, and the new one, The Gates of Hell. But a couple of, several that I've written by myself. And looking back on it, it's like, okay, well, I'll give the Lord credit for this if there's any benefit to it. But yeah, we just feel very compelled to research and write and just share what we're finding in the Bible. And I think it's important to say what we are not trying to do is to sensationalize things, to come up with ways of interpreting the Bible that are new and different and exciting just so we can sell books. What we're trying to do is get back to understanding the Bible the way the prophets and the apostles understood the world around them. That's right. And because that's kind of been lost, especially over the last 1,600 years or so, since the time of Augustine in the early 5th century. But yeah, the world is very, we're natural beings, but we're living in a supernatural reality.
I think the church has had a very hard time understanding that.
Especially here in the West. Now, you probably know missionaries who've been out in the field in the Southern Hemisphere, whether it's South America or Africa.
Yes.
And they see things that can't be explained naturally. In fact, a friend of ours who's a Lutheran theologian, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, so he's pretty conservative, unlike, say, the Evangelical Lutheran Church. Mm-hmm. But when he went to Africa looking for information, research for his doctoral dissertation, he went to Madagascar and was confronted on his very first day there by a person who fell down in front of him at a church gathering and began frothing at the mouth and screaming. And a number of people came over and began casting out the demon. And he was stunned. He thought at first they were playing a joke on the American. Then he realized they hadn't had time to put this together. So this was real, what was happening in front of him. He was in denial. This can't be happening. It must be a joke. Wait, this really is happening. And so he asked the person who was driving him around, does this happen a lot? Well, yes, this is why we have lay people trained to cast out demons. So in the West, we would assume the person that hit the floor needed psychiatric care, drugs,
Or their
something
blood
like that.
sugar dropped.
Blood sugar drops, something like that. But in Africa, they knew what they were seeing. This person has a demon and we need to cast it out. So they would have understood this in the first century, the church of the apostles. They would have understood this. The early church would have understood this. We've lost that worldview because now we're living in a world of science. And we need to, there's nothing wrong with science. Science is a wonderful tool for understanding this amazing creation that God gave us dominion over.
That's right.
But it is not the way to understand all things. There is a supernatural reality around us, and we need to have the discernment to recognize it when we see it.
And I think I could be wrong about this, but the way I interpret everything, all the information, or I shouldn't say information, the revelation that it's coming out. It's like the Lord is saying, you need to pay attention because we are coming full circle. And what was happening at the very beginning is going to start happening again. And the church needs to understand where we stand, who we are, and how we're going to face this new reality that's practically at our door. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that we are at the end times?
Oh, yeah. We're getting very close. What we see in the Middle East with the redrawing of the map there geopolitically, or as Sharon would say, theopolitically, because we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and cosmic rulers over this present darkness. Paul meant we're not, our real opponents are not our political opponents. We're not wrestling against other humans. It's the spirits in the spirit realm, whether they're fallen angels or demons, and there's a difference between those two. But they're the ones that we are wrestling against. And some of the things that have happened in our culture in the last 10, 15 years, the rise, for example, and I don't want to pick on people with gender dysphoria, but the transgender movement, this idea that, which is totally unscientific,
That's right.
that somebody with an XX chromosomes can claim to be a man, and somebody who's an XY can claim to be a woman, and that we have to reinforce that delusion. I mean, there is no logic, there's no science behind that, and yet this has become accepted amongst the so-called progressive part of our society. Well, this was the way the things worked before Moses came down Mount Sinai with the law. When you go back to the ancient world, the ancient Sumerians worshipped a deity and a goddess, but sometimes she manifested as a god called Inanna, known as Astarte in the Bible, Aphrodite to the Greeks, Venus to the Romans. She manifested as a number of different entities in the ancient world, but she was remembered in Sumerian hymns as being able to change men into women and women into men, and she would change herself back and forth. Her temple servants were castrated, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes it was. The point is that this idea that gender is whatever you say it is not progressive, it's regressive. It's going back to the way things were 5,000 years ago.
Incredible.
So we can't understand it unless we look at it as a spiritual phenomenon. And that's what we're seeing going on around the world today. And of course, again, the very fact that Israel exists, God promised it would happen. It happened in 1948. I know there are some who say that, no, that's not the real Israel. I beg to differ with you.
I agree.
This was a mile marker on the road to Armageddon. We are headed towards the end times, and the fact that you've got these factions who are willing to do absolutely irrational things to try to move Israel out of the land and restore control of the land to Muslims who serve a different God, I hope that, I apologize if that offends some people, but the God of Islam is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Again, it's a spiritual war
But
because
some
God
people,
has declared
there are
that Zion,
Christians. There are Christians, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but there are Christians who claim that Allah is the same as Jehovah,
yeah,
Adonai. And I think we need to go back to the Bible and look at the attributes of God and say, wait a minute. And we get confused because we may see that the Lord tells, for example, Joshua, go and exterminate this group
right.
of people. There was a reason for that. And I think this issue with, and I don't want to derail our conversation, but this issue with the giants and the Nephilim has been greatly overlooked, misunderstood, and the Lord is trying to bring this to the forefront of the church's conversation and saying, pay attention,
Yeah.
read the word, study, so that you prepare for what's coming, right?
Oh, yeah.
Would you
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And I don't think it's derailing the conversation at all, to be honest with you, Marcia. I think in Last Clash of the Titans and over the past 10 years, as we've been studying this, and it's sort of developed through our books, which is why there's some overlap between these books. I wrote a book about the spiritual forces behind Islam called Bad Moon Rising. But in Veneration, we go deep into the study of the cult of the Nephilim, the Rephaim, they were called after the flood.
yes, yes.
Their spirits were what we now call demons. And we show from secular researchers that the heroes of the Greeks, and this is why the subtitle of Last Clash of the Titans is the second coming of second coming of Hercules, because the demigod heroes of the Greeks, like Heracles and Perseus, were the Rephaim of the Canaanites. The Canaanites, who the Rephaim were, they venerated them. We've got Canaanite texts where in the Canaanite, it's Rapayuma, but it's the same word, were summoned from the Rephaim of the earth, Rephaim of the underworld, are summoned. They would summon them for the crowning, the inauguration of the coronation of a new king. They found these Canaanite texts dating to about the time of the judges, so the time of, say, Samson and thereabouts, Gideon and those guys. These spirits were summoned from the netherworld, and there is a secular scholar from the country of Estonia. His name is Amar Anus, who's done some amazing research. We cite him in almost every book. He showed
I have
that
his name highlighted here.
Yes, you can find his work online at academia.edu. He showed etymologically from the language that the heroes of the Greeks were the Rephaim of the Amorites and the Canaanites. So yes, Heracles, of course, by definition, being the son of Zeus and a mortal woman, was a demigod, a hybrid, one of the Nephilim. And we know from early church writings that it was believed by the early church fathers that demons were the spirits of these demigods who lived before the flood. But it was also the belief of the Greeks. The pagan Greeks understood this. It's just they thought the daemons, which is where we get the word demon, who were the spirits of the men who lived during this golden age, their spirits traveled the earth and they were kindly protecting humans from harm and giving good gifts and things like this. So they had a fundamentally different opinion of demons than Jews and then Christians, but they understood that their origin was the same. The giants, the demigods who lived before the flood, when they died, their spirits became demons. So we deal with those today. So is it possible? You think about this, Paul going around, as he's preaching the gospel in all of these areas that were colonized by the Greeks, casting out demons. Was Paul doing battle with Hercules? Was Jesus, when he was casting out demons, throwing out Hercules and Perseus and Theseus and, all of the Greek heroes? Possible. We don't know. But that's the reason for the subtitle, A Last Clash of the Titans. And Amar Anus, this scholar I mentioned earlier, also showed that name, Titan, the old gods of the Greeks, led by Kronos, who was banished to Tartarus by Zeus and the Olympians. That word Titan actually comes from the Canaanites. In turn comes from Akkadian. It's a word that probably means bull or bison. But Kronos, the name, comes from a Semitic word, meaning related to Hebrew, and it means horns. So you got that connection there. The Greeks, the bottom line is here, the Greeks and the Romans got their religions. What we've been taught was mythology. Zeus, Jupiter, Saturn, Kronos, all of those entities, you can trace them back to Canaan. From there, you can trace them back through the Amorites to ancient Mesopotamia. The religion of Greece and Rome comes from Mesopotamia. Who knew?
This is all so relevant. I'll tell you what happened to me. Back in September of 2023, we had a tour following the steps of Paul, and we went to Greece and Patmos, and the Lord just put in my heart this strong feeling, take the book with you. And I said, okay, I'll get to read in the airplane, and it's going to be, I had no idea that I was going to be confronted with these demons. They are alive and well in the Greek Isles. These places are plagued from one end to the other of the isles, of the islands, with these demons. They're everywhere. The clothing, the paintings. They say that they have more than 400 churches in a very small island, over 400 Christian churches. But if you walk in there, what are you going to find? You don't find Jesus anywhere. Not even Mary. Is these demons. The place is full of demons. We went to Santorini, and we also went to the other very famous island, which I can't recall the name of it. It's the most beautiful. You think you're in paradise. Mykonos. However, when you discern what moves in that place, it's plagued with demons. It's plagued with sex, all kinds of terrible things. And I was like, this book is coming alive in front of my very eyes. It was enlightening. It was at the same time scary, because I'm thinking the church needs to understand that this is not myth. It's not Greek mythology. It's the spiritual reality. And that's what we've been confronting for millennia, and it's coming back stronger than ever. And I think the pulpits need to understand and teach about these things. What do you think about that?
Well, I agree with you. The reason I wrote the book, The Second Coming of Saturn, is because I was very interested in the leader of the old gods, the Titans, Saturn in Rome, Kronos to the Greeks. I wondered, if he was so important to that mythology, and assuming that he is now in Tartarus, the bottomless pit, we know from 2 Peter 2, verse 4, that the angels who sinned, and in the context of 2 Peter 2, it's clear that it's a sexual sin. So it's talking about the sons of God in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4.
Correct.
The word translated hell in 2 Peter 2, verse 4, God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but thrust them down to hell. That word is Tartarosis, so it's Tartarus. So we know from the Bible that there are angels who fell, who sinned, committing a sexual sin, Genesis 6, those sons of God. They were called watchers in the book of First Enoch, which is not in the Bible, but there's some very important information in there. This leader in Revelation chapter 9 is called the angel of the bottomless pit. In Hebrew, he's called Abaddon. In Greek, he is Apollyon, which both of those names mean the destroyer. So logically, it would fit that Kronos, or Saturn, is the destroyer, Apollyon and Abaddon. And that was the research I did for the second coming of Saturn. But as I started digging into what we know from ancient texts written by Greeks and Hebrews and Canaanites and Akkadians and Hurrians and Hittites, so forth, you basically find out that this entity was known by many different names in the ancient world. He was El, the father god of the Canaanites, whose mountain, his mount of assembly, was Mount Hermon, which is the mountain at the very north of Israel, the border between Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, where, according to the book of First Enoch, the leader of this rebellion, the sons of God from Genesis 6, named Shemaiah, led this group of 200 that came down to the mountain, and they formed a mutual pact. They swore an oath to one another that they would go and corrupt humanity by taking wives and teaching us things we weren't supposed to know. It's like, okay, so Kronos, Saturn, is Shemaiah, and he's also Abaddon or Apollyon, Revelation 9. Well, who else is he? Well, according to the Bible, he was called Milcom. Well, in the Bible, Milcom is referred to as the abomination of the Ammonites. Outside of the Bible, we know that Milcom was El of the Canaanites, who was also Enlil of the Akkadians and Babylonians and Sumerians. But Milcom, we also know, was referred to as Molech by the Hebrews. So Kronos, Saturn, is Molech. Shemaiah is Molech. Molech is the destroyer, Abaddon and Apollyon. So that's the whole point of that book. But it brings it into the present day, because I argue that inside the United States Capitol, that painting on the roof inside the Capitol dome called the Apotheosis of Washington, which means George Washington becoming a god. Mm-hmm. He's depicted among these pagan gods in the heavens, but he's depicted in a way that I argue is just the way Saturn was depicted in Rome. His legs are wrapped in purple, which is the color of royalty. But in the temple of Saturn in Rome, the statue, the idol of Saturn, had his legs wrapped in wool for about 51 weeks out of the year. The only time his legs were unwrapped was during the Saturnalia, which was the most popular religious festival in Rome, when everything was flipped upside down. Slaves were served by their masters. People could be rude to one another. It was a time of revelry and partying and drunkenness and debauchery. And that's when Saturn was out of the netherworld. And then his legs were wrapped again. Well, okay, so now you've got George Washington, legs wrapped, purple, color of royalty, depicting a new golden age with the pictures around Washington inside the Capitol dome. So my argument is that this is, whether it was intended by the painter or not, a representation of Washington, the father of our nation, representing Saturn, returning to his rightful place in the heavens. Saturn, Kronos, Abaddon, Apollyon, Molech. And we saw the riot inside the U.S. Capitol, January 6th, 2021. Sharon pointed out that that is the day called Epiphany or Theophany in the Roman Catholic churches. In other words, the day on which traditionally the three wise men saw the Christ child in the manger and recognized his godliness, his divinity. Yes. So on the day that we celebrate in the Western churches the divinity of Christ, you've got this riot inside the Capitol where Washington represents the return of Saturn to his rightful place in the heavens. And who led the rebellion? The guy wearing the buffalo hat, Kronos, the horned one, leading that rebellion. And all of the talking heads on cable news and many of our elected officials referred to the U.S. Capitol as our temple of democracy. Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Nancy Pelosi, we're all calling it our temple of democracy. Our temple of democracy has been desecrated. It's like, in fact, former Representative Liz Cheney said, the most sacred space in our democracy, that's what she referred to it as. It's like, no, I'm sorry. The most sacred space in our democracy is wherever you are when you're in prayer.
That's right.
So, but we've got all of these elected officials, political commentators on the news channels saying, no, it was a desecration of our state. No, sorry, that's just an office building where our legislators meet. But you've got this symbolism inside that represents, I think, what secret societies and occult groups are trying to create, which is the return of this golden age with the return of Saturn, Kronos, Apollyon, Molech, to what he thinks is his rightful place in the heavens. And notice that this happened just after the winter solstice of 2020, when Jupiter and Saturn met in conjunction on the winter solstice. They were less than 1 degree apart. That was the closest observable conjunction of those two planets in 800 years. Astrologers, and as Christians, we know our futures are not told by the movement of the planets, but astrologers call it the Great Mutation, the beginning of a new age, a new golden age.
I don't like that. I don't like that phrase too much. I've heard it recently.
I know. I know. I wish President Trump wouldn't use it. I know what he's trying to evoke, but the golden age is going back to a poet, and this is in, I think I referenced it in the last Clash of the Titans, but I know I go into it in some detail in the Second Coming of Saturn. The point is that when this old Titan, Saturn Kronos, returns, according to a Roman poet by the name of Virgil, how does it go? It's the fourth eclogue. Justice returns old Saturn's reign with a new breed of men sent down from heaven.
Oh, Lord.
And it's about return of a golden age. And so, does President Trump know what he's saying when he's talking about that? I doubt it. But there are probably those whispering in his ear suggesting, hey, this'll go over well in your speech.
And I
we
noticed
as Christians.
I noticed as you were speaking that astronomy has been stolen from us and replaced with astrology, and we are fearful, we are afraid to consider astronomy and the story that the Lord wrote in the stars. And now the church kind of lost its north, and we don't understand any of the symbolisms. We don't understand God's calendar. We don't understand, and I'm saying we as in in general, because we make sure that we teach about all these things in our church. We want people to understand what the Lord is saying, what the stars and the moon and the sun are saying. It is important, right? And as I'm hearing you, I realize, oh my goodness, so many things have been stolen, and the Lord is trying to restore all the knowledge.
That's it. And again, this requires discernment, because when we first get into this and we first begin to notice, say, the occult symbolism that's everywhere around us, we can get so caught up in it and pointing it out. Say, hey, did you notice the symbolism here at the halftime show at the Super Bowl? All right, yeah, it's been this way like every year now for the last, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. It's there. I mean, you look at the MTV, well, I don't, but from what I've read about shows like the MTV Video Music Awards, the Grammys, whatever, you get artists who are trying to make a name for themselves, who are doing these things. Whether they understand what they're doing or not, I don't know. But it's always been so. There's always been people in the entertainment industries who are trying to attract attention to themselves, who are doing these things. We can point these things out, but there's a danger in getting caught up in it and getting addicted to the adrenaline rush of finding these things and becoming fearful. And look, we're surrounded by this. Oh, look, the logo on the front of my car is an occult symbol. You're using an Apple product. The apple represents the apple from Eden. It's like, the Bible doesn't say it was an apple, just saying.
Thank you.
Anyway, the bottom, and hey, so that means we're just using the enemy's devices against him. Isn't that clever?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Just remember Psalm 2. The nations rage and imagine a vain thing. He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord holds them in derision. So yes, these people are doing these things. You've got the symbolism inside the U.S. Capitol. You've got our elected officials who may be engaging in occult. I don't know. But the bottom line is they're useful idiots for the fallen realm. These people, the globalists, the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, they rage and imagine a vain thing. They think they're winning. Poor fools, because they will find out in front of the great white throne.
Oh my goodness.
That they were misinformed.
I'm speechless.
And that will not get them out of their just rewards. Unless at the last minute they've got to change your heart before they shuffle off this mortal coil. and say,
Hmm.
I was wrong, Lord Jesus, please save me, like the thief on the cross. But there will be people that we will meet in glory that we'll be shocked to find there. And there'll probably be some people shocked to see us there as well. But those who think they're creating heaven on earth,
Hmm.
whether they're globalists, transhumanists, whatever, they get in front of that great white throne and say, I was misinformed. It's like, well, sorry, you had your chance.
You had your
You had your
chance.
chance.
You never looked
You
at the
were
Bible. You never considered.
you were given the opportunity and the message was presented to you and you rejected it. So
I,
depart from me. I never knew you.
I think every person, and I don't. I think about this often. Somehow, every person on the planet will be exposed to the person of Jesus Christ and his redemptive work. And there's a lot of people that say, well, but there's a lot of tribes out there that have no internet. They're secluded. They don't really have any exposure to society. How are they going to know? I don't know, but I know that God is fair. He is just, and
Yes. Yes.
somehow, one way or another, they are going to be exposed to the person of Jesus Christ. And at that point, it's the most important moment of their eternity. What are we going to do about the Son of God? How are we going to react? We need to respond
Hmm.
to the person of Jesus Christ. And I think that the church, since we've already established, and I think it's very clear that we are in the end times and that we are quickly approaching his second coming. I think the church needs to wake up from its slumber and say, I need to get with the program. I need to take into account the spirit realm. I need to understand that all these entities, that the mythology, and we need to put two and two together and say something is strange, something is off. And we need to come out of our religious box and say, it's time to look at the world from God's perspective and not ours, not through religion or traditions, what I've been taught by my grandmother, by my uncle, or whoever. We need to consider the word of God and we need to study it and take it seriously, because when we do, the Lord is going to start revealing all these things. I mean, for example, the books that you have written, yes, you're talking about history, you're considering or reading or taking into account the book of Enoch, which has been so controversial for so many years, but nonetheless, it's not truth per se, but we need to consider it, because when we read Enoch and we consider what the word of God says, it's like a piece of the puzzle fits perfectly, correct? And so
Absolutely.
I think the church needs to wake up and say, I need to read the word, but I also need to consider the sources that the Lord is putting before us. You would not be able to present a complete truth talking about these entities and talking about mythology and Zeus and Mercury and all these the titans from way back when, if you didn't have the word of God, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's there was a sense that we had early on. In fact, I remember when our daughter was in elementary school and they had a module in one of their classes where they taught them the Greek alphabet. And Nicole just thought that was the coolest thing ever. She really enjoyed the stories of Greek mythology. This was really before the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, where kids are being taught how awesome it would be to be a demigod, the son of
Yeah.
Zeus or Neptune or whatever. Poseidon, I guess. I'm mixing the Greeks and the Romans. But yeah, she would leave us little notes written in Greek characters and slip them under our door. And like, okay, now I'm gonna have to go look this up on the internet because I don't know what those are. But she was sharp enough as we began understanding what Genesis 6 actually meant, that there were giants on the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, which of course is a euphemism, and giants were born to them. And she's like, well, that means Hercules is one of the Nephilim. Yes, that's exactly what that means.
Wow.
So there was a sense that this overlapped, but when you start digging into it, you see that, yeah, not only is it evident a few places in Scripture. For example, in Matthew 12, beginning at verse 22, he's confronted by scribes and Pharisees who accuse him. It was scribes and Pharisees. Anyway, religious authorities in Jerusalem who accuse him of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul, which means Baal the prince. And Jesus says, if Satan casts out demons by his own power, how will Satan's kingdom stand? So he's connecting Satan and Baal. All right. Baal was just Zeus by a different name, the storm god, the king of the pantheon, the one who took over. It's not a coincidence that in Canaanite religion, there are stories of the tension, in fact, the struggle, physical, violent struggle between the storm god, Baal, the god of the sea, Yam, and the god of the underworld, Mot. Just as in Greek mythology, there was tension between Zeus and his brothers Poseidon and Hades because they got it from the Canaanites, the Amorites. But then you go to Revelation 2, verse 13, the letter that Jesus dictated to John for the church at Pergamum. I know where you live, where Satan dwells. Well, that's a reference to the great altar of Zeus. Zeus is Baal. I go, okay, so Zeus is Satan. Oh, okay, so we get that connection there. How about that? But then again, you go outside the Bible and secular scholars like Amar Anus and others like Nicholas Wyatt of the University of Edinburgh, Jan Bremer, who's a well-known scholar of Greek religion, they too see the connection between the Greeks, the Titans. Yeah, that those were the Ditanu of the Canaanite religion, entities who were confined to the netherworld. But the name comes from the Semitic world, not Proto-Indo-European. This is Semitic religion that was transferred to Greece. And now they're admitting, oh yeah, okay, we know that the Mycenaean Greeks, the Greeks of, say, Homer and, the Iliad and the Odyssey,
Yes.
the Greeks, Agamemnon, who fought the Trojan War against the city of Troy, they were known to be in what was Canaan at the time as early as the 14th, 15th century BC, the time of Joshua. The Hivites, the Hivites in the Bible, Hivits, mentioned in the book of Genesis, those were Mycenaean Greeks. The Greeks were in the land. In fact, we argued in the book Veneration that the Anakim were probably Greek because the word Anakim comes from a Greek word that means hereditary king, the Anax. Agamemnon was the Anax. His lesser kings like Odysseus were Basilia, different word. That's where Anakim comes from. So anyway, yeah, it shouldn't surprise us that Greek and Roman religion comes right from Canaan. The Greeks were seamen. They had built ships. They traveled across the Mediterranean and they were all over the place. So it all fits together, which is fascinating in and of itself. But when you start seeing the connections and realize that's why I named the book Last Clash of the Titans, based on that really cheesy movie Clash of the Titans.
I remember
The
that
Titans.
movie.
Yeah, I like the remake with the Liam Neeson playing Zeus. Release the Kraken, which is hilarious because the Kraken comes from Norse mythology, not Greek. But anyway, the Titans are the gods who are in the nether, small g gods who are in the netherworld, in the bottomless pit, in Tartarus. They are the angels from Genesis 6. And that is what opens up in Revelation chapter 9. So a day is coming when the Titans return and literally bring hell on earth. So when Saturn returns, the second coming of Saturn, it's not going to be a golden age. It is literally going to be hell for the people on earth without the seal of God in their foreheads.
That was my question before we close. How is all of this relevant? Some people just can't make the connection. And I think it's because deep down, they don't believe that we're at the end times and that the Lord is returning. There's a lot of people in denial thinking Trump is going to fix everything. Life is going to be beautiful. We are at the gates of the golden age and we have nothing to worry about. Let's travel, let's party, let's have fun. But I see what the Lord is trying to do. He's bringing all of this to the forefront and saying, pay attention. This is all real and it's going to manifest. So we're at the gates of the end times. This is all relevant. This is all important. We need to pay attention, not only so that we prepare and we are aware of our surroundings or our reality, but because we need to intercede. We cannot do spiritual warfare the way we were doing it 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Things are different. So I have a focus with the intercessors, with the prayer warriors, and I want them to know and understand where we're at, what's coming, what's going to manifest. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So will you tell us what you think about this?
The spiritual war for control of the land of Israel is not a geopolitical struggle between Arabs and Israelis. It never has been. It's all about which entity is in control of the Har Moed. That's a Hebrew phrase that means mount of assembly or mount of the congregation. We see that in Isaiah 14 with the rebel from Eden who's cast down because he wants to establish his Har Moed, his mount of assembly, in the far reaches of the north, or the sides of the north, or the heights of the north. That's a phrase in Hebrew that is only used 3 places in the Bible. It's Yarkate Tsephon. It's a reference to Mount Tsephon, which is the mountain in Ezekiel 38 and 39, the uttermost north, Yarkate Tsephon, where Gog of Magog, which is the Antichrist, brings together his supernatural army to come against Israel in war. He brings the whole world against Israel for control of the Har Moed, God's Har Moed. That's the phrase that John transliterated into Greek as Armageddon. Now, because of the similarity in sound, Bible teachers for years have been saying, no, it's Megiddo. That's 50 miles from Jerusalem. No, it's Jerusalem, God's Mount of Assembly, Zion, as we read in Psalm chapter 2. I mentioned earlier, why do the nations rage and imagine a vain thing? Verse 6 in Psalm 2, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill, but the word is harp, my holy mountain. Eden was a holy mountain, Ezekiel 28, from which that rebel was cast off, cast down. He wants to take it back. That's what Armageddon is about. And that's why since 1948, Israel has been in an existential fight for its life. But it's not because they hate Israelis. If it were the Crusaders back in the 12th century, the Muslims wanted it back because the God they serve, Allah, which I argue in the second coming of Saturn, is actually Molech, El, Enlil, Saturn, Kronos, the destroyer.
And the Lord said
Abaddon,
Lord said that he hated him. He despised him.
Yes. That is the entity, I believe, that Muslims serve. And I think that's El of the Canaanites. When Solomon's kingdom was split in the time of his son, Jeroboam, the rebel, who took the northern tribes, he set up the golden calves at Dan and at Beth El, which means temple or house of El. Going back to the Canaanite worship of this old entity, the god, another name by which this god was known, by the way, was Dagon, who was the chief god of the Philistines in Gaza.
Well.
And so we are still, yes, exactly. But we are still seeing this war playing out to this day. And that's why we're seeing and have seen since 1948, this constant struggle for control of Israel. If the Israelis gave up land, two-state solution wouldn't bring peace. It wouldn't bring peace until they had total control of the land. And again, it's not the Arabs, it's not the Muslims, it's the God behind them. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So look, it's a spiritual war that has been ongoing for 3,400 years, ever since Joshua led the Israelites across the Jordan River. And it will continue until Christ returns at the head of that heavenly army. We read in Zechariah 12 that Jerusalem is about to become a cup of staggering drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples. They're acting irrationally.
Yes,
it makes no sense. We look at the condition of Gaza that it's in right now. As Donald Trump has said, President Trump has said, look, it's a demolition zone. It's unlivable. Why would anybody want to stay there? And yet they refuse to leave. The Arab nations surrounded. We refuse to allow you to move anybody out of that. Who could live there? But it's because it's not about Gaza. It's about Jerusalem. It's about the Har Moed, God's Mount of Assembly, the place where God meets the enemy. The God they serve wants control of it simply because that's where God decreed he will dwell forever. This is all about it's a supernatural war, and we are leading up to it. There's still some time to go, yet we still have time to preach and share the good news, to tell people, look, don't be afraid. Yes, there are difficult times coming, but this life that we're in is temporary. This is temporary. We're all eternal beings. We're all going to live forever. The question is, where are you going to spend the rest of eternity?
Yes.
So place your trust in Christ, share the hope that you have in him with family members, with friends, with colleagues, with coworkers, with gentleness and respect.
That's right.
And know that God has seen the end from the beginning. So these things that are happening, nothing is taking him by surprise. There is not a single day when God goes, I didn't see that coming. It's all in his control. Our mission is to hold our ground, stand our ground, and wait for the army. Pray, and wait for the enemy to come over the hill at the head of that heavenly host.
Wow. And we're getting closer and closer.
Yes, we are.
I thank you so very much for sharing this wealth of information with us. I am
God
so
bless you.
grateful that our audience is able to hear all this and think and meditate and pray that the Lord will allow us to see truth, and so that we can pray effectively. At the end of the day, that's one of the main reasons why the church is still here, so that we can pray. So Derek Gilbert, I suggest if you read, even if it's a little bit of English, you know what I would do if I come across a book like yours? I would find, there it goes. I would find I would go to Google and translate phrase by phrase, but I would not miss anything that you have written in this book. It's an amazing book, and we can learn so much and have understanding, spiritual understanding. So Derek, thank you. I bless you. I bless your ministry.
I just want to make one suggestion which might be helpful. We have a Substack account now where we are posting excerpts from our books, usually the equivalent of like 5 or 6 pages of the book at a time, but it's at gilberthouse.substack.com. And since the text is already there on the page, Google Translate may be able to translate the entire page at a time. And so you're getting the equivalent of half a chapter or a chapter at a time. And that may be of some help.
Oh, that's a great idea. So I'm going to put that on the subtitles for the episode today. And I pray that you will take this resource and use it to bless your family, your friends, and discuss the things to come. So Derek Gilbert, once again, thank you so very much for being with us. Many blessings to you and to Sharon, your wife. And I pray we will see you soon.
God bless you. Thank you.